Welcome to Mr. Fearhouse. Take a breath before you step any further. The air down here gets thinner the deeper you go. Tonight we're descending into the dark. 3 of the most horrific caving experiences ever recorded. Real accounts of explorers who went too deep, too far, and found something waiting in the silence below the earth. No lights, no signals, no way back. These aren't ghost stories. They're the kind of moments where the dark doesn't just surround you. It listens, and once you hear it breathing back, it never stops. Most people watch these stories, feel the chill, and move on without subscribing. But you stayed. That already says something. Tell me, what time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments. I like knowing who's still awake when the night starts whispering. Now, keep your light steady, and whatever you do, don't look back. Here are tonight's encounters. The first thing I noticed was the sound. That faint, hollow drip echoing somewhere in the dark. It didn't belong to any cave I'd been in before. It was too steady, too human, like a metronome keeping time for something waiting to begin. I was deep underground in eastern Kentucky, crawling through a limestone tunnel no wider than my shoulders. My headlamp flickered every few minutes, the battery indicator already red. Behind me, my 2 friends, Mason and Kelly, were arguing softly about the map. I could barely hear them over my own breathing. Every exhale bounced back into my face, warm against the cold, wet rock. We'd come here chasing a rumor. Local spelunkers called it Root Cave, because supposedly, it led to a church buried beneath a forest swallowed by the earth after a landslide 100 years ago. The story went that the congregation was inside when it happened. No bodies ever found. No one ever dug it out. We thought it sounded like a great weekend trip. But somewhere between the second and third crawl space, I stopped feeling like we were exploring. It started to feel like we were intruding. The tunnel sloped downward, tight and slick. My gloves were soaked. Every time I moved my knee, grit scraped through the fabric. The air grew colder, heavier. The smell changed too. From that mineral, dampness caves usually have to something stale, like paper and mildew. I don't know how to explain it, but the deeper I went, the more it felt like the cave didn't want us there. When we finally broke through the crawl passage into a wider chamber, I stood up too fast and hit my helmet on a low ceiling beam. Not a rock, an actual beam of wood. That's when I realized we were no longer just in a cave. Mason swung his headlamp around and let out a low whistle. Holy hell, this is man-made. The space was maybe 30 feet wide, 40 long. The walls weren't stone. They were lined with rotted planks, warped and blackened by moisture. In the center stood what looked like a small wooden podium, half collapsed under the weight of mud and vines that had pushed through the cracks above. Kelly brushed her gloved fingers over a plank and whispered, This looks like a church." She wasn't wrong. There were rows of benches, or what was left of them. A narrow aisle led up to that crumbling podium. The air was so still it felt frozen, yet I could hear faint dripping, steady, rhythmic, echoing somewhere near the back wall. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. Let's mark this and get out. It's not stable. But Mason was already walking toward the podium, his light bouncing off something carved into the wall behind it. "Dude, you need to see this," he said. I hesitated, then followed. The carvings covered almost every inch of the back wall. Thousands of tiny letters scratched deep into the wood. I leaned closer, brushing away a layer of dust. They weren't random symbols. They were words. Prayers, I think. But every single one was written backward. "Who the hell would do this?" Kelly murmured. Mason laughed under his breath, but it sounded forced. Some cult freaks, maybe. The more I stared, the more wrong it felt. There were names mixed in with the words. First names, hundreds of them, some scratched deeper than others, as if rewritten over and over. That steady dripping noise grew louder. "Is that water?" I asked. No one answered. We followed the sound to the far corner, where the floor dipped into a pit maybe 4 feet wide. I knelt beside it, shining my light inside. It wasn't water dripping, it was thick, black sludge seeping from a crack in the wall, drop by drop, into a pool that reflected nothing. The smell hit me next, metallic and sour, like rust and rot. I gagged and pulled my scarf up over my nose. "Let's go," I said again, louder this time. "We'll come back with better gear." But Mason wasn't listening. He'd found a door, or what was left of one, behind the podium, a slab of wood half buried under dirt and roots. He knelt and started clawing at it with his gloved hands. "Mason, stop," Kelly snapped. "You're going to cause a collapse." He didn't even look back. "There's something behind this. I can feel air coming through." And he was right. A faint draft brushed against my face and cold and steady like something exhaling. Then came the sound. A dull, hollow thump from behind the door. All three of us froze. Another thump, slow, heavy, like something knocking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Mason looked back at us and whispered, "You heard that too, right?" Before I could answer, his light flickered, and for the briefest second, I saw movement behind him, a shadow that didn't match ours. I lunged forward and grabbed his arm. "We're leaving. Now." Kelly didn't argue. She was already backing toward the crawl tunnel. But before we could move, the knocking came again, louder this time, faster. Not one spot, but several, all around us, like the walls themselves were coming alive. The carvings seemed to shimmer under our lights. The names. They were darker now. Wet. I stumbled back, my boots splashing in that black pool. "Go! Go now!" We scrambled toward the crawl tunnel. The air pressure shifted. I swear it did, like the whole chamber took a deep breath. As I reached the entrance, my hand brushed the rock ceiling and I felt something warm drip onto my wrist. I looked up. Roots hung from the stone, thick as veins. And from one of them, a dark red droplet fell, slow, deliberate, and hit the ground between my gloves. Blood, or something that looked too much like it. We crawled back through the tunnel as fast as we could. Mason was behind me, still muttering, "It's not blood, it's not blood." Kelly was ahead, her boots scraping frantically. I didn't look back, not until I felt a rush of cold air brush past my neck and a whisper, faint but close, breathe right into my ear. "Don't leave us." I screamed so loud the cave echoed for what felt like forever. When we finally emerged into the main passage, I ripped off my helmet and stumbled against the wall, gasping. Mason and Kelly were pale, shaking, covered in mud. None of us spoke for a full minute. Then Kelly said, her voice trembling, "Did either of you hear that?" Mason shook his head too quickly. "No, you're just freaked out." But I saw his eyes. He was lying. The tunnel behind us stayed silent. No drips, no wind, just a heavy, unnatural stillness. Then, from the dark hole we'd just crawled out of, came one last sound. Faint, but clear. A single knock, and then another. 3 total. Like someone on the other side praying to be let out. When we finally reached the surface, it was already dark. Not twilight dark, the kind of black that eats the beam of your flashlight. I remember standing there at the cave's mouth, bent over, hands on my knees, lungs burning like I'd swallowed smoke. My heartbeat wouldn't slow down. The night air should have felt clean, but it didn't. It felt heavy, sticky, like the cave's breath had followed us out. No one spoke for a long time. We just stood there, headlamps dimming, surrounded by forest that sounded too quiet. No crickets, no wind, not even leaves moving. Mason finally broke the silence. "We got it on video," he whispered, pulling out his GoPro. His hands were shaking. "That's insane footage, man." Kelly snapped her head toward him. "Are you serious right now? We could have died down there." "I'm just saying," Mason stammered. "We found something no one else has. A buried church, carvings, everything. You saw it. But all I could think about was that voice, that whisper that shouldn't have existed. I didn't tell them I heard it say my name." We hiked back to camp in silence. Every sound made me flinch, a twig snapping, a distant owl, even the crunch of our boots. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone walking just beyond the tree line. When we finally reached our tents, Kelly went straight inside hers and zipped it up without a word. Mason sat by the dead campfire, fumbling with his GoPro. I joined him because the idea of being alone terrified me more than staying near him. He clicked the power button. The little red light blinked, then went out. "Battery's dead," he muttered. "Figures. Charge it tomorrow," I said quietly, but Mason was restless. He kept tapping his fingers on his knee, glancing at the dark tree line. "You think it was like people down there? Maybe squatters? Maybe that knocking was just—" He trailed off because we both knew it wasn't that. There was no way. The sounds came from inside the walls. I didn't sleep much that night. Every few minutes I thought I heard footsteps outside my tent. When I finally did drift off, I dreamed I was crawling through the tunnel again. But the wood carvings were breathing, expanding and contracting like lungs. When I looked down at my hands, the dirt was pulsing. I woke up before dawn with my heart racing. We packed up as soon as the light came. Kelly barely spoke to either of us. She kept rubbing her arms like she couldn't get warm, even though the sun was up. Before we left, Mason walked back to the cave entrance to take one last look. I yelled after him to hurry up, but he didn't respond. When he finally returned, he was pale and sweating. "There's a sound," he said quietly, coming from inside. I wanted to ask what kind of sound, but I didn't want to know. We left the site and hiked back to our truck. The dirt road was rough and the forest seemed endless. Halfway out, Kelly suddenly said, "Do you smell that?" It was faint but real. That same sour metallic scent from the underground pool. Like rust and decay. "Might be in our clothes," I said, trying to sound calm. But the smell wasn't coming from us. It was drifting in from the open windows. Back home, things didn't get better. 2 days later, Mason called me in the middle of the night. His voice was shaking. "Dude, the footage uploaded by itself." "What?" "I never charged the GoPro, but the files are on my computer. And the timestamp says it was recorded yesterday." I didn't know what to say. "Maybe you—" "I didn't touch it," he interrupted. "But that's not even the worst part," he hesitated. I could hear his breathing on the line, shaky, uneven. "There's more people in it now." My skin went cold. "What do you mean?" "In the background behind us. They weren't there before. You can see them moving in the shadows near the podium." I felt sick. "Send it to me," I said. "No way. I don't even want to look at it again." Then he hung up. The next day, Kelly texted me a photo. Blurry. Taken in her bathroom mirror. In the reflection behind her shoulder, the wooden carvings from the church wall were faintly visible. She wrote, "Tell me you see that too." I called her immediately, but she didn't answer. That night I started hearing it again, the same rhythm. 3 slow knocks, sometimes from the ceiling, sometimes from the walls, always 3. I tried to convince myself it was just the pipes or the neighbors or my brain replaying the cave sounds. But when I turned off the lights, I could still smell it. That metallic stench, and I swear I heard someone whisper through the dark, "Don't leave us." By the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove 2 hours to Mason's place. His truck was in the driveway, but no one answered when I knocked. I walked around to the back, calling his name. The patio door was open a few inches. The smell hit me immediately. That same damp, earthy odor. "Mason?" I called again, stepping inside. The house was a mess. Dirt smeared across the floor like someone had tracked it in from outside. His GoPro sat on the kitchen table, still recording. When I picked it up, I saw the red light flashing. It was filming the hallway. And at the far end of that hallway was a door I'd never seen before, a wooden door. Old, splintered, covered in carvings. My stomach dropped. I stepped closer and slow, careful. The air got colder with each step. The carvings were the same as the ones in the cave. Prayers written backward, names etched deep. My name was one of them. I froze. Then from behind that door came a soft, rhythmic knock. 3 times. I backed away, shaking, and bolted out the front door. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. When I looked back, the house was dark. But through the window, I could still see the red light of the GoPro blinking, steady like an eye watching me leave. That night, I tried calling Kelly again. No answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The next morning, Mason's number was disconnected. I sat on my couch for hours staring at the wall, listening, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:07 a.m., there was a knock at my front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. When I looked through the peephole, there was no one there, just wet footprints leading away back toward the woods. I didn't go back right away. I tried to pretend life was normal. Work, coffee, pretending to sleep. But it didn't last. The noises wouldn't stop. Every night around the same time, I'd hear that same pattern. 3 knocks. Always slow, always deliberate. Sometimes it came from my walls, sometimes from beneath the floor. Once, I swear I heard it inside my closet. At first, I told myself it was in my head, that the cave messed me up, that I was just replaying it. But one night, I recorded the sound on my phone, and when I played it back the next morning, I could hear breathing between the knocks. Not mine, not human either. Too long, too wet, like air being pulled through mud. That's when I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers. I started researching Root Cave again. Most local forums treated it like an urban legend. A few mentioned the church, the buried chapel of Siloam. Supposedly it was built in 1893 by a group that split from a nearby congregation. People said they held secret midnight services, that they buried prayers under trees, that they refused to let anyone leave the church once you joined. The story went that in 1912, the hillside collapsed after weeks of rain. The entire church and its people were swallowed by the ground. The county sealed the site. But the strangest part? The name of the preacher back then. Elias Mason. I read it twice. My stomach twisted. Mason, the same as my friend. I drove to Kelly's apartment next. Her car was still in the lot, covered in dust. The curtains were drawn, but I could hear her TV playing inside. Just white noise. Static. I knocked once, then twice. Nothing. When I tried the handle, the door creaked open. The smell hit me first. Damp soil, rotting wood, and something faintly metallic. My flashlight flicked across the living room floor. Dirt everywhere. Roots, actual roots, pushing through the carpet, coiling like veins. Kelly? My voice cracked. No answer. In the kitchen sink, muddy water dripped steadily from the faucet even though it wasn't running. Every drop landed in rhythm. 3 beats, drip, drip, drip. I followed the sound to her bedroom. The door was half open. When I pushed it, my light caught something scratched into the wall. The words were carved deep, shaky, "Don't leave us." Her bed was empty. Sheet-soaked, muddy footprints trailing toward the window. And then I heard it again, from inside the closet this time. 3 knocks. I didn't open it. I ran outside. I didn't even lock the door. I just drove. I didn't have a destination, just a way. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake that smell. It clung to my clothes, my skin, my car. When I stopped for gas an hour later, I checked the trunk. My gear bag was still there, the same one I'd used in the cave. Mud streaked across the zipper, still damp. And from inside the bag, I swear I heard a faint, muffled knocking. I didn't open it. I just slammed the trunk shut and kept driving. By the next morning, I'd made up my mind. I had to go back to Root Cave. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me thought if I returned what we disturbed, it would stop. Maybe I just wanted to see proof that it was real so I could finally tell myself I wasn't losing it. I packed a new light, a rope, a small camera. No map this time. Just the route burned into my memory. The forest looked different when I got there. The trees were dry, gray, stripped bare like it was winter, but it wasn't, and there were roots everywhere. Thick, black, reaching across the ground like veins searching for something. When I reached the cave mouth, my stomach dropped. It had changed. The opening was wider now. The soil looked freshly torn like something had been pushing outward. I almost turned back. Almost. But then I heard a sound from deep inside. Faint, distant but unmistakable. Someone whispering my name. The tunnel felt narrower than before. The air was damp and cold, but not dead still like it had been. It was moving now, breathing in shallow drafts that made my light flicker. I kept crawling until I reached the wooden chamber, the church, except it wasn't buried anymore. It had grown. The walls weren't just lined with wood. They were wood. Thick roots and planks had fused together, stretching higher, forming crude pews and arches that hadn't been there before. The podium was standing again, straight, clean, like it had never collapsed. I felt dizzy. The carvings glistened under my light, every word damp, freshly cut, and then I saw them. 3 helmets, lying in the front row. Mine. Mason's. Kelly's. I stumbled forward and picked mine up. The inside was wet, not with water, with soil, packed tight. Something shifted behind me. a soft scrape of wood against stone. I turned my light toward the podium. Someone was standing there. He looked like Mason. Same height, same face, but his skin was gray, stretched tight like it had dried and cracked. His eyes were dark, pupilless. When he smiled, dirt spilled from between his teeth. "You came back," he said, voice low and distant. "We've been waiting." I couldn't move. My body felt frozen, like the air had thickened around me. "Mason," I whispered. "Where's Kelly?" He tilted his head. "She's here. We all are." He stepped aside, and behind him the wall pulsed, actually pulsed, as if it were breathing. I saw faint outlines in it. Human shapes pressed beneath the surface. I recognized one of them, Kelly's face. Eyes closed, lips moving like she was still whispering a prayer. My stomach turned. "What did you do?" "It's not what I did," he said. "It's what you started." The ground trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The roots hanging above twisted, reaching downward like fingers. "Mason, listen to me," I said, backing up. "We can leave." "We can get help," he laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "There is no leaving. The church moves. The roots grow. It finds what it needs." The floor cracked beneath my boots. I turned and ran, but the tunnel wasn't where it had been. The opening was gone, replaced by a wall of wood and dirt, wet and breathing. Behind me, I could hear footsteps. Slow, steady, following. And that voice again, echoing through the dark. "Don't leave us." I clawed at the wall, trying to dig through. My nails tore. The air was filling with dust, and that metallic stench was choking me. Then from behind, 3 soft knocks, on my helmet this time. I screamed and kicked backward, my boot connecting with something solid. A low groan echoed, and the footsteps stopped. When I turned around, the chamber was empty. The podium was gone. The carvings were gone. Even Mason's helmet had disappeared. Only the knocking remained, distant now, fading deeper into the dark, and then silence. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember crawling, gasping, clawing through loose dirt until daylight hit my eyes. When I finally pulled myself free, I was bleeding and covered in mud. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even hold my flashlight. The forest was silent again. The air smelled like rain. For a moment I thought maybe it was over. Maybe it had let me go. But then I looked down. At the base of the hill, where the cave entrance used to be, new roots were pushing through the soil, thick, wet, and still moving. And if you listened closely, under the rustle of leaves you could hear it. That faint, hollow rhythm. 3 slow knocks. I haven't slept since that day. Every time I close my eyes, I feel the soil pressing against my face, the roots coiling around my wrists. Sometimes I wake up gasping, half expecting to see the cave ceiling inches above me again. But it's worse when I'm awake, because I know it didn't stay there. For the first few days after escaping, I stayed at a cheap roadside motel an hour from the site, the kind with flickering lights and walls so thin you can hear the next room breathing. I thought distance would help, that the farther I got from that place, the quieter my mind would become. But the silence followed me. The third night, around 2 a.m., the room got freezing cold. The kind of cold that comes from the ground, not the air. I pulled the blanket tighter and told myself it was just the AC unit rattling again. Then came the smell, that same metallic, earthy scent, wet roots and rust. I sat up, heart pounding, and checked the vent, the bathroom, even under the bed. Nothing. But when I pulled back the curtain, I saw the dirt. A fine layer of black soil dusted the windowsill. And on the glass, drawn with a fingertip, were 3 small crosses, backward. I left that motel before sunrise. Back home, things only got worse. The smell was already waiting for me. My apartment felt damp, heavy, like it had been underground for years. I tossed my gear bag in the trash, scrubbed my floors, left every window open. None of it mattered. The air stayed thick, stale. That first night back, the knocking started again. 3 soft knocks from somewhere inside the walls. I froze, listening. Another 3 from the ceiling. Then 3 more faint under the floor. It moved when I moved. I slept with the lights on, sitting upright on the couch. Around 4 a.m., the TV turned on by itself, static hissing across the screen. I tried to turn it off, but the remote wouldn't respond. The static grew louder, shifting into whispers. I couldn't make out the words at first, until I heard my name over and over, "Come back, come back." The screen flickered, and for a split second I saw the wooden podium. The church, a shadow behind it, tall and still. Then the TV went black. The next morning, my neighbor knocked on my door. She asked if I'd been doing construction during the night, said she'd heard hammering and wood scraping. I told her no, but when I looked down I saw mud under my fingernails. Thick, dark mud. I hadn't been outside. By the end of the week I couldn't tell what was real anymore. My apartment floorboards started to bulge slightly, like something was pushing up from underneath. The smell was unbearable, damp rot and old wood. I tried calling Mason again. The number still didn't exist. Kelly's apartment had been sealed off by the police. Water damage, they said. Foundation collapse. I almost laughed when I heard that. They didn't know. It wasn't the foundation collapsing. It was the ground swallowing. Last night I decided to record it, to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. I set my phone on the counter, hit record, and left it running while I sat in the dark. For 20 minutes nothing happened. Just silence. Then faintly a creak from the hallway. My heart started racing. Another creak. Then a slow dragging sound like roots tearing through drywall. And finally, 3 knocks. I didn't move. I just whispered into the dark, "What do you want from me?" The air changed. It got colder, thicker. I could hear breathing again. Wet, heavy, and then from right behind me a whisper, "You already gave it to us." I spun around. Light flashing across the room, but there was no one there. Just my reflection in the window, except there were 2 of me. The second reflection was smiling. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I must have, because when I played the recording later, I could hear everything. The breathing, the knocking, my voice, and then, at the very end, another voice layered over mine, whispering the same words at the same time, like it was inside me. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. I'm writing this from my car, parked on the edge of the forest near Root Cave. The signal keeps cutting out, but I need to tell someone, anyone, before I go back in, because I don't think it's just a place anymore. I think the church is growing. Everywhere I go, the ground feels softer. The roots crawl a little farther. I see them breaking through sidewalks, wrapping around stop signs, pushing up through the asphalt, like veins reaching toward me. I used to think it wanted to keep us down there. Now I think it wants to bring itself up here. The sun's almost gone. The air smells like rain again. I can see the cave from where I'm sitting, or what's left of it. The hillside's cracked wide open now, and the opening glows faintly, like there's firelight inside. I hear the faint echo of a choir, low, distorted, out of sync. It's calling. Mason, Kelly, Elias, and then softly, my name. If anyone finds this, don't come looking for me. Don't go near that forest. Don't dig, don't explore, don't listen. The church beneath the roots isn't buried anymore, it's awake, and it remembers everyone who's heard it. I can hear the knocking again now. It's not far away this time. It's coming from underneath the car. 3 slow knocks, the ground just moved. It's... The smell hit us before we even saw the tent. It wasn't rot. Not the kind you expect when an animal's been dead too long. It was something else. Sharp and metallic, like blood that had dried and then been reheated by the sun. I remember slowing down without realizing it, my boots crunching on gravel while Ranger Ellis kept talking up ahead. His voice was steady, practiced. He'd been doing this for 20 years. But that smell made my stomach twist, and suddenly the forest didn't feel like a place people were meant to walk into. We'd been out since sunrise. 3 hikers had gone missing near the base of the ridge, all within a week. A family on vacation had found an abandoned trail of footprints leading toward the lake, and nothing after that. Search and rescue had already been through once, but the woods out here are endless. Tangled roots, hidden ravines, caves that look like shadows until you fall into them. Ellis told me we were checking an old campsite that had shown up on drone footage. Probably just some illegal hunters or squatters, he'd said, his voice calm. Don't make it something it's not. But now, standing there, I could see it in his eyes too. That flicker of unease he tried to hide. We stepped into the clearing. The tent was still up, perfectly intact. No rips, no signs of a struggle, just still. A small fire pit sat in front, surrounded by neat stacks of firewood, all unburned. Two folding chairs faced the ashes like their owners had just stepped away for a walk. A mug sat beside one of them, half full of something dark that had dried into rings. Flies hovered above it, their buzzing oddly low like they were whispering. "See?" Ellis said, crouching by the fire pit. "Could be campers spooked by a bear or something." I didn't answer. My eyes were on the tent. The zipper was halfway open, and from where I stood I could see the inside walls, lined with something pale. I took a step closer, my boots sinking into the soft ground, and realized what it was. Animal hides, hundreds of them. They were pinned flat against the fabric, stitched in some places, dried in others. Deer, rabbit, raccoon, all different shades, tanned and stretched tight like some kind of grotesque wallpaper. The smell hit harder now, thick and sour. I felt my throat close. "Ellis," I whispered. "You seeing this?" He turned, frowned, and stepped up beside me. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Just the wind moving through the trees, the faint creak of the tent poles. "Could be a trapper's setup," he said finally, but even he didn't sound convinced. Still, that's not standard practice. There were shapes drawn on the hides, lines burned into the skin with something hot, circles, hooks, some kind of crude faces. I leaned closer to one, tracing it with my flashlight. The eyes were wrong, too close together. The mouth stretched into a thin, sharp curve, and then, I swear to God, it blinked just once. A slow, wet shudder of movement beneath the surface of the hide. I jerked back so fast I nearly tripped over a log. My flashlight hit the ground, beam scattering across the dirt. Ellis grabbed my shoulder. "What's wrong?" "It moved," I said, voice shaking. It fucking blinked." He looked at me, then at the wall of hides, then stepped inside. "Nothing's moving," he muttered, poking one with his glove. It made a dry rustle. "Just wind. Or maybe—" "Wind doesn't blink," I said through my teeth. He didn't answer. We stayed there for maybe 5 minutes, poking around, taking pictures for the report. There were no sleeping bags, no food wrappers, no signs anyone had actually stayed there. Just that tent, that smell, and those hides that looked too fresh. When we left the clearing, I kept glancing back. The tent stood perfectly still, and no movement, no sound. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside it was listening. The hike back was quiet. Ellis walked ahead, GPS in one hand, radio in the other. I trailed behind, eyes darting between trees. Every few steps I thought I heard something. A faint dragging sound like wet fabric being pulled through grass. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it followed, just far enough back that I couldn't see it. By the time we reached the service road, the sun was dipping low, throwing long, spindly shadows across the gravel. We loaded our gear into the truck without talking. I kept catching myself glancing at the tree line. I could swear I saw shapes moving, just slight distortions like heat shimmer. "Don't say a word of this to anyone yet," Ellis said as he climbed into the driver's seat. "Not until we get those photos processed. We'll go back tomorrow with more people." "Tomorrow?" I said. "You want to go back there?" He started the engine. "Yeah, we've got missing hikers, remember? That tent might be the only clue." He turned the radio up, maybe to drown out the silence. But the sound that followed us wasn't silence. As we drove away, something moved in the rearview mirror, a figure stepping out from behind a tree. Just for a second, tall, thin, wearing something that looked like leather or fur, then gone. I didn't tell Ellis. I just kept staring into the mirror until the forest disappeared. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that blink, the way the skin had rippled like there was something alive underneath it. I tried to convince myself it was just my eyes playing tricks. Maybe moisture on the hide, maybe the reflection of my flashlight. Anything but what it looked like. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. "It was Ellis. You up?" He texted. "Yeah," I replied. "Can't sleep." "Me neither," he sent. "Listen, I was going over the photos. You need to see something." He sent one. It was the tent wall, the same one I'd looked at up close, but there was something new in it. Something that hadn't been there before, a face. Pressed against the inside of the hide, not drawn or stitched. Pressed. The outline of a mouth, nose and eyes bulging outward, straining against the surface like it was trying to push through. The eyes were open. I dropped my phone. It hit the carpet and the light cut off, plunging the room into darkness. I sat there shaking, staring at my reflection in the window. Every noise outside sounded too deliberate. A twig snap, a low hum, something brushing against my wall. When I finally picked the phone back up, Ellis had sent one more message. "Look closer at the timestamp," he wrote. The photo was taken at 3:12 p.m. I blinked. We'd left the site at 2:50. The next morning I went straight to the ranger station. Ellis wasn't there. His truck was gone, his desk untouched. The chief told me he hadn't checked in, hadn't called, hadn't answered his radio. By noon they sent a search team. I went with them. The smell found us again before the clearing did. Only this time it was worse. Thicker, heavier, clinging to our clothes and skin. The fire pit was still there. The chairs too. But the tent, it wasn't just an empty patch of dirt, flattened grass where it had been. Maybe wind took it, one of the rangers said, though no one really believed it. Tents don't just vanish, like especially when they're staked that deep. There were drag marks, faint but visible, leading into the woods. Ellis's footprints followed them. Single file, like he'd gone willingly. We followed for a mile before the tracks disappeared into a narrow ravine. It looked like a dried stream bed, all cracked mud and roots. At the bottom, half buried in the dirt, was Ellis's flashlight, still on, beam weak and flickering, and next to it, something else, a strip of skin, not animal. Too smooth, too human. That night they called off the search. "We'll resume at dawn," they said, but I knew nobody wanted to go back in there. Not after what we'd found. I sat alone in my truck, staring out at the dark line of trees. The air felt wrong and too still, too heavy. No wind, no insects, no night sounds. Just silence that pressed against the glass like a held breath. Around midnight, something moved between the trees. A pale shape, slow, careful, watching. I turned off my headlights. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The figure stepped closer. Tall, wearing what looked like patchwork leather from head to toe. The face was wrong. Uneven. One side smooth, the other tight and glossy like new skin. It stopped just at the edge of the road, and then it raised its hand. It was holding something in a flashlight. Ellis's flashlight. The beam flicked on, pointed straight at me, and in that white circle of light I saw it clearly. The jacket it wore wasn't leather. It was stitched hides. Animal, human, mixed together. And one of the faces sewn across its chest was Ellis's. I started the truck and floored it. Gravel sprayed behind me as I tore down the service road, headlights bouncing. I didn't look back, not even once. But for the next 5 miles I could swear I saw the beam of that flashlight in the trees keeping pace beside me. I didn't report what I saw. How could I? They'd think I was cracked from stress or sleep deprivation. The official report said Ellis disappeared during an active investigation. The campsite was written off as abandoned property, possibly linked to illegal hunting. The photos were sealed. But 2 weeks later, another ranger went missing. Then a hiker. Then a whole family that had stopped near the ridge for lunch. Every time the same note in the file. Last seen near the old trailhead by the lake. They closed that part of the forest after that. Put up signs. Fines for trespassing. Locals called it cursed. Said the woods took what it wanted. I never went back. Still, some nights when I drive home past the edge of the tree line, I roll down the window, just a little, and listen. And when the wind is right, I swear I can still hear it. The faintest creak of canvas, the soft rustle of skin brushing skin, and the sound of a zipper slowly opening somewhere in the dark. I didn't go into the woods for almost a year after that night. Even driving past that stretch of road made my chest tighten. Every time I saw the tree line, I'd feel that same pressure in my ears, like the forest itself was holding its breath. It sounds stupid, I know. It's just trees, just dirt. But you can feel when a place doesn't want you there. You can feel it in your gut. I transferred stations 3 months later, took a desk job at the visitor center near the valley. Safer work, fewer patrols. Paperwork doesn't stare back at you from the dark. But even from there, I kept hearing about it. Whispers, rumors, the kind of talk that spreads in small towns when no one wants to say the truth out loud. Campers finding shredded tents. Stray dogs disappearing near the ridge. A couple who said they found leather sheets hanging from branches, soft and clean like someone had just skinned something fresh. Every story was different, but the ending was always the same. They didn't stay to find out. About 11 months after Ellis vanished, a new ranger joined the department, a young guy named Travis. Mid-20s, smart, too eager for his own good. He had that rookie shine. The kind that makes you think rules are optional and nothing bad really happens out here. He'd only been working a few weeks when he came by my desk one morning, holding a printed satellite map. "Hey, you ever been to this section?" he asked, pointing near the ridge. I found a weird clearing on the drone feed, big enough for a few tents. Looks recent, my stomach dropped. It was the same area. I told him it was closed, off limits. He grinned. "Yeah, I know. But don't you think it's weird that someone's camping there again? I'm gonna check it out later, just to be safe." "Don't," I said too quickly. He blinked. "I mean it. You don't go there alone," he laughed, thinking I was joking. "Relax, man. I'll radio in every hour." But I wasn't joking. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. That smell, those hides, Ellis's face, stitched to something that wasn't supposed to exist. I hadn't forgotten any of it. Not 1 second. Travis left around noon. By 2, his check-in stopped. The first missed radio call wasn't unusual. Bad signal, terrain interference, battery drain. Happens all the time. But by the 3rd hour, the chief was getting tense. He sent 2 rangers to sweep the trail. By dusk, they hadn't found him. Something in me snapped. I couldn't just sit there again. I grabbed my old pack, flashlight, and revolver and drove out there myself. The gate to the ridge road was rusted shut. I left the truck running, jumped the fence, and followed the trail on foot. It was getting dark fast, that heavy, suffocating kind of dark that doesn't fade gradually but just drops all at once. Every step deeper into the trees felt wrong. The air got colder, heavier. The usual forest sounds, crickets, frogs, wind, gone. The silence was so thick it pressed on my ears until I started hearing my own blood rushing. I tried the radio, static. I tried again, whispered, "Travis, this is Mason. You out here?" Nothing, then faintly a sound. A single sharp click like a zipper. I froze. It came again, closer this time. Click, click. Slow, deliberate. And beneath it, breathing. I turned off my flashlight and crouched low. The forest was almost black, just a sliver of moonlight cutting through the canopy. The sound moved ahead, maybe 20 yards, then stopped. I waited. The air smelled faintly metallic again, blood and something sour. I knew that smell, and then I saw it. The tent perfectly intact, same shape, same color, and inside, faint movement, something shifting against the canvas. I don't remember deciding to move closer. It was like my body stopped listening to me. I crept up 1 step at a time until I was close enough to hear the fabric creak. There was no fire, no light, just that faint, wet sound of movement. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold the flashlight. I reached out, slowly, bare, and lifted the flap. The beam cut through the dark, and what I saw inside made my knees give out. Travis, or what was left of him. He was sitting upright, eyes wide open, skin pale and taut, like something had drained him dry. His mouth hung open, frozen in mid-scream, but what made me drop the light wasn't his face, it was what was behind him. The walls, lined again, with hides, fresh ones, and some of them were still breathing. They pulsed faintly like the surface of water when you drop a pebble. The sound was wet and quiet, tiny exhales coming from under the skin. I stumbled back, my boot catching on a rope, and realized there was something stretched across the ground beneath the tent, layers of rawhide stitched together into a kind of floor. Something beneath it moved. I scrambled backward, falling into the dirt. My flashlight rolled, beam spinning wildly until it landed on the corner of the tent, where a human hand hung from a nail, skin flayed clean. I recognized the scar on the knuckle. Ellis, I ran. I didn't think. Didn't look back. Just ran until my lungs burned and my legs went numb. Every few steps I could hear it, that sound. The dragging. Wet fabric scraping over roots and leaves. When I reached the road, my truck was gone. I stood there in disbelief, staring at the empty space where I'd parked it. My keys were still in my pocket. The gravel was undisturbed. No tire tracks, just gone, like it had never been there at all. I turned, scanning the woods, flashlight shaking in my hand. "Who's there?" I shouted. My voice cracked. "Travis, Ellis. Anyone!" The forest didn't answer, but something moved in the dark, just at the edge of the beam, a shape. Tall, thin, wrong. Its movements too smooth, too quiet. I aimed the light at it. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even standing on the ground. It hung there, suspended from the branches like a marionette, limbs bound by something that looked like veins instead of rope. Its head tilted toward me slowly, jerky and unnatural, like something learning how to move for the first time. The face, God, it wasn't one face. It was many patches of skin stitched together, some old, some new. One eye was cloudy, the other sharp and blue. The mouth didn't line up right. It smiled, and I heard the sound of the stitches tearing slightly as it did. Then it whispered, a low, rasping sound that wasn't quite human. "Ellis says hi." My legs gave out. I dropped the flashlight, light tumbling across the dirt. The thing moved closer, not walking but dragging like the air itself was pulling it forward. I backed up until I hit the guardrail. Behind me, nothing but the drop to the ravine. "Stay back," I whispered. "Stay the hell away." It tilted its head again. That smile stretched wider, and I could hear the faint creak of fabric tightening. Then, movement. Behind it, another figure, and another. Dozens of them stepping out from the dark, all wearing patchwork skins, faces stolen, sewn together. Their movements were slow, synchronized, like they shared one single breath. Some were missing limbs, some had too many. But all of them had the same thing, those eyes. Empty, glistening, alive. The whispering started again, dozens of voices overlapping. My name over and over, Mason. "Mason? Mason?" I turned and jumped. I must have rolled for 30 feet before hitting the bottom of the ravine. Everything hurt, ribs, shoulder, neck. My flashlight cracked, but the beam still worked. I grabbed it and started crawling. My hand hit something soft. For a second, I thought it was moss. Then I saw the fingers, a whole layer of them. Disembodied hands, palms upward, pressed into the mud like a warning. I gagged, stumbled to my feet and ran until I couldn't hear the whispering anymore. I found an old ranger shack near the dry creek bed, half collapsed, door hanging off one hinge. I barricaded myself inside with a broken chair and sat there until dawn, clutching my flashlight, shaking so bad I could barely breathe. Every few minutes, I heard something brushing against the outside wall. Light. Rhythmic, like someone dragging their nails across it. Once I heard footsteps on the roof. Then silence again, long, empty, choking silence. When the sun finally rose, the forest looked normal. Calm. Peaceful. Like none of it had ever happened. I walked back to the road. The truck was there, right where I'd left it, keys in the ignition. Engine cold. But on the windshield, written in something dark and sticky, were 4 words. "You left him behind." I drove straight to the station. I must have looked insane, mud-caked, bloody, shaking. They took my statement, called in a search team, went over everything again. They found nothing. No tent, no body, no footprints. No sign of Travis, just one thing left behind in the clearing. A piece of skin, tanned, dried, stretched flat. It had words etched into it with a knife. Part of the forest now. That was 3 years ago. I quit after that. Moved out of state. Got a job in maintenance at a marina. Simple, quiet work, where the only sounds are the waves and the gulls. But sometimes at night, when the wind moves through the boats just right, I hear it again. That dragging. That low, wet rustle of canvas and breath. And every once in a while, I'll find something strange near the dock, and a scrap of hide, a piece of rope, a zipper. Like the forest's still out there. Still hunting. Still remembering. It's strange how fast you can convince yourself something never happened. A new town, a new job, sunlight. That's all it takes. You start believing the nightmare was a trick of the dark. That the forest was just a forest. That skin doesn't breathe. That you didn't see a man wearing your friend's face. That was me. For a while, it worked. The marina was quiet, clean, predictable. The smell of salt water replaced the rot of the woods. The creak of boats replaced the whispers. I rented a small apartment near the edge of the pier. 1 bedroom, barely any furniture, but it was mine. Peaceful. For almost 6 months, I slept through the night. Then little things started happening. At first it was nothing, just sounds. Footsteps on the dock long after closing. Ropes creaking when there was no wind. Sometimes when I'd check the boats, I'd find the ropes untied even though I was the last one to leave. Then I started finding marks, tiny scratches on the wooden railings, 3 short lines like something had been dragged across them. Sometimes the marks looked almost like letters, but not in any language I knew. I told myself it was kids, or wind, or maybe even rats. Anything but what I knew it felt like. One night in mid-July, I stayed late for a shipment that never showed. The others had gone home hours ago. The air was heavy and still, one of those nights when even the sea feels asleep. The water barely moved, reflecting the moon in a perfect silver sheet. I was sitting in the office doing inventory when I heard the sound. A faint zipper, long, slow. I froze, pen still in my hand. The noise came again, closer, right outside the window. I stood, heart pounding, and peeked through the blinds. There was no one there, just the dock, empty. But the sound didn't stop. It moved, circling the office, soft and deliberate. Zip, pause, zip, pause, like someone opening and closing a bag, slowly, carefully. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped outside. The air hit cold, too cold for summer. I swept the beam across the dock, ropes, barrels, reflection of the water. Nothing, but the smell. That smell. I hadn't smelled it in years, but it hit me like a punch, metallic, rot hidden under earth. Like dried blood left out in the sun. I turned the light toward the sound. It was coming from Boat Slip 6, an old trawler that hadn't been rented in months. I approached slowly, every step echoing on the wood. The zipper sound stopped. The flashlight trembled in my hand. The reflection of the water shimmered softly. And then I saw it. A shape crouched near the boat's hull. It was tall, thin, motionless. Its head turned toward me in one slow, fluid twist. And I saw the glint of metal, a zipper running from its neck down to its stomach. I couldn't move. My whole body locked up. The thing straightened, one deliberate motion after another, bones shifting beneath the skin like wet leather stretched too tight. Then, a sound, soft and human. A whisper. Mason. That voice, I hadn't heard it since the forest. Ellis. My stomach dropped. Ellis? I croaked. The figure stepped forward and I saw its face. It was Ellis, but not really. Half of his face was gone, replaced with new skin, lighter, smoother. The stitches were perfect, the seams almost invisible. His eyes, though, they were still his. Just empty. He smiled. You left me, he said softly. I stumbled backward, the flashlight shaking. You're not him. You're not... Left me, he said again. His jaw creaked as he spoke, the skin around it stretching unnaturally. You were supposed to stay. Then, as he stepped into the light, I saw movement behind him. Another figure, taller, broader, its face covered by a patchwork of hides, and then another, and another. They came out one by one, climbing from the shadows beneath the dock. The boards creaked, but they made no sound, just breathing. Deep, slow, wet breathing. The light flickered. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. My lungs burned, my chest ached, but I didn't look back. I ran straight to my apartment, slammed the door, locked it twice. For hours I sat on the floor staring at the doorknob. Nothing happened. No knocks, no sounds, just silence. When the sun came up, I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, PTSD, anything. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But that night when I came home, there was something waiting for me, for a single strip of leather lying on the doorstep, smooth, pale, folded neatly in half. When I picked it up, I realized what it was. Human skin. Fresh. The next few weeks blurred together. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see the tent. The hides, the blinking wall, Ellis's stitched face. I started hearing things at work. Faint whispers under the hum of the generator. Zipping sounds when I walked past the storage shed. Once I caught my reflection in the water, but it wasn't quite right. My mouth was open, like I was screaming, except I wasn't. By the end of August, I'd started keeping a knife in my pocket. I carried it everywhere. Grocery store, shower, even to bed. Then came the night I found the bag. It was sitting on the dock when I opened up for the morning shift, a large canvas duffel, old and stained. No tags, no note, just sitting there like someone had left it for me. I knew I shouldn't, but I unzipped it. Inside were rolls of tanned leather, perfectly cut, perfectly folded, and right at the top, a face. Travis. His eyes gone, lips stitched closed. I dropped the bag and vomited over the railing. When I looked back, the bag was gone. Just the wet stain where it had sat. That's when I knew. It had followed me. Not just Ellis. It. The skin hunter doesn't live in one place. It doesn't haunt a forest or a tent. It moves. It takes what it wants, and when it's done, it carries those faces, those skins somewhere else, like trophies. And now it wanted me. 3 nights later, I woke to a sound that made my blood turn cold. Zipping, right outside my door. Slow, deliberate. I reached for the knife. My hands shook so bad I could barely keep hold of it. The sound stopped, and then came a new one, fabric stretching, breathing. The doorknob twitched once, twice, then silence. I sat there until morning, knife still in my hand. When the sun finally came up, I opened the door. There was nothing there. No bag, no footprints, just the faintest smell, metallic, dry, and heavy. I was losing it. I knew I was. I decided to leave town that day, packed what I could into the truck, grabbed some food, cash, and the knife. I didn't even bother locking the door, just got in and drove. I drove for hours through back roads and small towns, stopping only for gas. Every time I closed my eyes at a red light, I saw them. The stitched faces, the blank eyes, the zipper. At sunset, I pulled over at a rest stop by the woods. I told myself I just needed 10 minutes to breathe. That's when I noticed the smell again. It was faint, drifting from the trees, metallic and sweet. And hanging from a branch at the edge of the forest was a piece of canvas. Old, dirty. It fluttered in the breeze just slightly. My stomach twisted. I stepped closer. The edges of the canvas were torn, frayed, like it had been ripped from a tent, and stitched into the middle of it, in uneven letters, was my name. Mason. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My vision tunneled, everything narrowing to that one word stitched in black thread. Then, behind me, I heard it. The creak of canvas, the faint pull of a zipper, and a whisper, low and wet, right next to my ear. You brought it with you. I turned and ran for the truck. I could hear footsteps behind me now, fast, heavy, too many. I didn't look back. The keys slipped from my hands twice before I jammed them into the ignition. The headlights flicked on just as something stepped out from the trees. It wasn't Ellis this time. It wasn't anyone I knew. It was wrong. Its skin was too smooth. Its arms too long. The face, a perfect patchwork of different tones, stitched so tightly the seams were almost gone. It looked real. Human. Almost. Beautiful if not for the eyes. Black and wet and shining like oil. It stepped into the beam, raised one hand and unzipped its own chest. Inside, darkness. And from that darkness came movement. Dozens of pale, shifting faces pressed against the inside, writhing beneath the skin. Ellis, Travis, others I didn't know. All mouthing the same silent word, Mason. I slammed the truck into reverse, tires screaming against gravel. I hit the road fishtailing before speeding off into the dark. My heart hammered so hard I couldn't breathe. I didn't stop until the Yoe highway opened up before me, and the forest disappeared in the mirror. I didn't go home after that. Couldn't, that was 3 weeks ago. I've been living out of motels since, small towns, nowhere places, changing names, paying in cash. I keep the curtains shut, the lights off, and I don't sleep much, but it still finds me. Last night I woke to that sound again. The zipper. I froze, staring at the motel door. Then I saw the handle twitch, just once, and the faint shadow of someone standing outside. I held my breath. The sound moved away. When I opened the door in the morning, there was something hanging from it. A strip of skin. I didn't scream when I saw the skin. I didn't even move. I just stood there, half awake in that cheap motel hallway, staring at the strip of flesh nailed to my door. Morning light filtered through the curtains, pale and weak, washing everything in a sickly yellow haze. It was soft. Too soft. There was a little curl at one end, like whoever had left it wanted it to wave when the door opened. The letters were carved so clean it looked printed. Part 4. I don't know why that hit me harder than anything else. Maybe because it meant it was still writing my story. I closed the door, bolted it, and slid down against the wall. My heart wouldn't slow down. I could still smell it, the faint coppery sweetness that clings to fresh skin. That smell doesn't leave. Not even after bleach. By evening, I knew I couldn't stay. The motel felt like a trap. Every shadow breathing, every sound stretched too long. I packed the essentials: wallet, knife, flashlight, one change of clothes. The strip of skin I left hanging. Let whoever cleaned the room call the cops. Let them think I'd gone insane. Maybe I had. I drove with no direction, just away. The road stretched like a black vein across the desert, straight and endless. The sun went down behind the hills, leaving that kind of purple darkness that eats headlights. I tried the radio to drown out my thoughts. Static. Every station. But under the static, faintly, I could hear it. A zipper. Click. 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 I hit the power off and kept driving. Around midnight, I saw a sign. National Forest, campgrounds 3 miles. I almost laughed. I should have turned the other way. But something in me twisted. A part of me that was tired of running, tired of waiting. If it wanted me, I'd stop hiding. I'd face it where it began. I followed the gravel road until the trees swallowed the sky. The forest looked different now. Thinner, colder, the ground wet with recent rain. My headlights cut through mist, catching trunks that looked like ribs. When I reached the clearing, I killed the engine. The silence was so deep it felt like pressure in my ears. I recognized the shape of the place instantly. The old campsite. The fire pit was still there, black and cold. The trees around it had grown, thick roots tearing through the earth. But the ground, the pattern of it was the same. The same hollow where we'd pitched our tents that night. And in the middle of it, something stood waiting, a tent. Canvas, dark and wet, like it had been standing there for years. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But my feet moved forward on their own. The air smelled like rust and rain. As I got closer, I noticed the tent wasn't really dark. It was stained. Every inch of it. Brown, red, black. I reached for the zipper. My fingers trembled. The metal was cold, colder than ice. When I pulled it down, it made no sound at all. Inside, the air was heavy, humid. I shone my flashlight. There were walls, but not fabric. Skin, stretched tight between poles. Some old, some fresh. I could see veins, hairs, freckles, a map of people. The air shimmered slightly, like the whole place was breathing. On the ground, half buried in dirt, was my old backpack, the one I'd left behind when I ran. And sitting on top of it was my knife, not the one I'd been carrying. The one from that night. I reached down and picked it up. The handle was slick with something sticky. When I turned it over, I saw words carved into the blade. Stay. I don't know how long I stood there. The air buzzed like a living thing. Then I heard a faint sound, not from outside, but under me. A heartbeat, slow, steady. I knelt, brushed away the dirt. Beneath the tent floor was flesh, pale, soft, pulsing slightly. And then it spoke. Why did you leave, Mason? The voice came from the ground, from everywhere. It was Ellis's voice, but slower, deeper, threaded with others. You were supposed to stay. The skin on the walls rippled like wind blowing through fabric. Faces began to emerge, pressing against the surface from behind, eyes opening where there hadn't been any. Ellis? I whispered. One of the faces pushed through the skin. His. Stitch lines across his cheek, mouth trembling. You ran. You left me. I didn't. The floor pulsed beneath my feet, harder now, like a heartbeat speeding up. The air grew warmer. Wet. The smell of blood thickened until I could taste iron on my tongue. "You left us," another voice hissed. Then another. Then dozens. The walls bulged, every face mouthing the same words. "Stay, stay, stay." I turned for the exit, but the zipper was gone. The flap of the tent had sealed itself shut, smooth as new skin. Panic clawed up my throat. I slashed at the wall with the knife. It cut, but no light came through, just more skin underneath. "Layers of it, Mason," Ellis said. I turned. He was standing inside the tent now. His body was wrong. Too tall, too thin, the joints bending backward. The seams on his face split open slightly when he smiled. "You took my place," he whispered. "Now it's your turn. What are you?" I choked. He tilted his head. "What we are." He stepped closer. I could see movement under his skin, muscles and faces shifting like water. The hunter doesn't choose. It collects. We all become part of it. And now, he reached out, fingertips brushing my cheek. "It's your time to join." I stabbed him hard. The blade sank deep into his chest but there was no blood. Just that same slick darkness like oil. He didn't flinch. He just smiled wider. "Thank you," he whispered. And then he grabbed my wrist. The skin around his wound began to crawl up the knife, over my hand, my arm. It burned, cold and hot at the same time. I screamed and yanked back, but it spread faster, crawling over me like liquid leather. I dropped the knife and fell backward. My flashlight rolled, flickering across the tent, faces twitching, mouths moving silently. I could feel it, the skin creeping up my neck, my jaw. It wasn't just covering me. It was sinking, matching my pulse, my breath, every movement. I clawed at it, tearing pieces off, but more kept sliding over. My reflection in the blade glimmered. My own face stretched, half-covered. Then I saw the hole, a tear in the wall, small and dark. I crawled toward it, dragging myself across the pulsing ground. The heartbeat roared in my ears, shaking the tent. Ella screamed behind me. Or maybe it was the tent. "You can't leave again!" I tore through the hole. Cold air hit me like a shock. I was outside. The forest was silent, but it was wrong. The trees looked newer, their roots thicker, deeper. The air smelled different, older. When I turned around, the tent was gone. All that remained was a circle of dirt, sunken slightly, like something had been buried there. I looked down at my arm. The skin was gone. Normal, my own. But faint lines remained, like thin scars forming patterns I didn't recognize. I didn't wait to understand. I ran. I don't remember getting back to the truck. 1 second I was in the woods, the next I was on the highway again, hands shaking on the wheel. The radio was still dead. My phone, too. No signal. I drove until dawn, until my eyes burned. At the first town I saw, I pulled into a diner. People looked at me strange when I walked in. Mud on my clothes, dirt under my nails. I must have looked insane. The waitress asked if I was okay. I told her I just needed coffee. She smiled politely, but when she brought it over, her expression changed. "Hey," she said softly, "you get into some kind of accident?" I frowned. "No," she nodded toward my cheek. I reached up. My skin felt different. Smooth. When I looked in the reflection of my cup, I froze. There was a faint seam running from the corner of my mouth down my neck. I left without paying. Now I'm writing this from another motel. Number unknown. Somewhere off Highway 12. The lights keep flickering. Every time they go out, I can hear it breathing behind the walls. I can feel the heartbeat again. Sometimes I think it's mine. Other times I think it's the forest's. The line on my cheek has started to widen. The skin around it feels loose, like it doesn't belong to me anymore. I keep hearing the zipper sound when I move. I think it's inside now. Last night I dreamt of the tent again. Only this time I wasn't outside it. I was part of it. I could see through the layers, faces pressed against mine, whispering through the folds. They weren't screaming. They were calm, peaceful. Ellis was there too, smiling. "We're whole now," he said. "You see? You stayed. When I woke up, my pillow was wet. Not with sweat, with something thicker." I turned on the light. The sheets were covered in small, square patches of pale skin. My skin, perfectly cut, perfectly arranged like trophies. If anyone finds this, don't look for the campsite. Don't follow the trails, don't go near slip six, don't pick up anything you didn't bring. It doesn't hunt places, it hunts stories. And the moment you read this, the moment you imagine what it looked like, you've already opened the zipper. Just listen. Do you hear it yet? That faint dragging sound behind you? Slow, deliberate. Zip. The Descent of Lake Mara. Part 1. The first thing they told me when I got certified for cave diving was simple. Never go where the light doesn't follow you back. At 200 feet below Lake Mara, that light was gone. All I could see was the beam from my headlamp slicing through clouds of silt, a thin cone of white in an endless black. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. My breathing turned mechanical. My own heartbeat echoed through my helmet like a warning drum. I remember thinking, if I die down here, nobody will even find my bones. But that was before I saw the opening. The dive had started normally. I was part of a small expedition, a 3-person team hired by a local university to document an unmapped chamber beneath Lake Mara, British Columbia. The lake was deep, cold, and fed by glacial springs. Perfectly clear near the surface, but pitch black once you passed 70 feet. The first thing they told me when I got certified for cave diving was simple. Never go where the light doesn't follow you back. At 200 feet below Lake Mara, that light was gone. All I could see was the beam from my headlamp slicing through clouds of silt, a thin cone of white in an endless black. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. My breathing turned mechanical. My own heartbeat echoed through my helmet like a warning drum. I remember thinking, if I die down here, nobody will even find my bones. But that was before I saw the opening. The dive had started normally. I was part of a small expedition, a 3-person team hired by a local university to document an unmapped chamber beneath Lake Mara, British Columbia. The lake was deep, cold, and fed by glacial springs, perfectly clear near the surface, but pitch black once you passed 70 feet. My team consisted of me, Jonas, and Riley. Jonas was the senior diver, ex-Navy search and rescue. Riley was the camera tech, small, quiet, and way too comfortable in places that could kill us. We descended in silence. The water around us shifted from blue to green to pure darkness, the world shrinking to the narrow circle of our lights. At 180 feet, Jonas signaled to level off. He pointed ahead, a rock wall with a thin horizontal crack barely visible in the beam. That was the cave entrance. We checked our gauges. Oxygen at 70%. Depth within limits, Jonas went first. His flippers brushed the sediment as he squeezed through the crack. I followed, careful not to stir the silt. The rock scraped against my tank, sharp, cold, unyielding. For a moment, it felt like the earth itself was closing in around me. Then, just like that, the passage opened up. I floated into a wide cavern, my light dancing across smooth limestone walls. The ceiling was domed, and the floor sloped downward into deeper darkness. Riley came through last, camera light flickering as he muttered something about the visibility. His voice was muffled through the comms, static-laced but calm. Then Jonas said it. The words that started everything. "You guys see that?" His light pointed toward the far wall. I turned, squinting through the haze, and froze. At first I thought it was a trick of the shadows, but no. The rock face wasn't natural. It was carved. It looked like an archway, maybe 8 feet tall, etched into the limestone. Time had worn it smooth, but the shape was deliberate. Around the edges, faint symbols spiraled outward. Not random scratches, but letters or runes. I swam closer, shining my light across the lines. They weren't like anything I'd seen before. Circular, looping, like someone had written language underwater. Jonas brushed his glove over one of the grooves. "Could be indigenous markings," he said through the comms, though he didn't sound convinced. "Or a cave formation that just looks carved," Riley said, his voice quieter. I didn't answer. I was too focused on what I'd just noticed inside the archway. Beyond the carved stone, the rock dropped into a black hole, a vertical shaft leading down into nothing. Jonas's voice came again, distorted by static. "Depth sensor says it keeps going. You up for a short descent?" I should have said no. Everything in me wanted to. But then I saw Riley's camera light reflecting off something deep below. a faint shimmer like metal. Curiosity won. It always does. We went down. At 220 feet, my chest started to ache from the pressure. The shaft narrowed, then widened again, forming another chamber below the first. That's when I saw them. Shapes. Dozens of them. At first, I thought they were rock formations, long, thin columns rising from the ground. But as I swam closer, I realized they weren't stone. They were suits. Diving suits, old ones. Heavy canvas, metal helmets, thick rubber hoses coiling around the floor. Some were upright, others tilted, all of them coated in a thin layer of silt. Jonas cursed under his breath. Holy hell. Are those Mark V suits? Those are from the 40s. There must have been 20 of them. I moved between them, brushing sediment off a chest plate. There was still a name tag, L. Morgan. Inside the helmet's glass, I saw something move. Just a flicker like dust shifting in the current. I leaned closer, shining my light directly into the faceplate. There was a skull inside. Not unusual for a wreck, I told myself. But the skull was clean. Too clean. The rest of the body was gone. No fabric rot, no decay. Just that perfect white skull, staring out from inside the helmet. And it wasn't facing forward. It was turned toward me. I pushed backward, my tank hitting another suit behind me. It toppled slowly, weightless in the water, and struck the ground with a hollow thud. The sound echoed. Jonas's voice cracked through the comms. Mason, you all right? Yeah, I said, forcing my breath steady. Just lost balance, but then Riley spoke. There's something down here. His voice was shaking. I turned my light toward him. He was hovering near the far wall, camera aimed downward. His beam caught something on the floor. A pile of gear, diving tanks, fins, cameras, flashlights, all modern. Our kind of equipment. Jonas swam closer, grabbing one of the tanks. The label was worn, but I could still read the name scratched into it. R. Keller. Riley's hand went to his chest. That's me. Before I could say anything, a sound filled my headset. Not static, a low, droning hum. It didn't come from any of us. It vibrated through the water, deep and constant, like a whale's call echoing in the dark. But it wasn't natural. It had rhythm, intention. Jonas tried to speak, but his words broke up. Let's get surface, too deep. The hum grew louder. My head began to pound. My vision swam. The lights flickered and the suits around us started to move. Not all at once. Slowly, subtly. One tilted upright. Another's arm twitched. The helmets turned, all at the same time. Every suit faced us. My breathing spiked. The air gauge needle dropped faster than it should have. Jonas, I shouted into the mic. There, he didn't respond. I turned him and he was gone. Just gone. His light, his bubbles, his shape, nothing. Only Riley was left, still pointing the camera at the moving suits, frozen in place. Riley, go, I yelled. He didn't move, his hand was trembling violently. The light on his camera flickered, and for a brief second, it illuminated his face. His mask was filled with water. He wasn't breathing. Then something pulled him backward into the darkness. I kicked hard toward the shaft, the walls closing in. The hum was deafening now, shaking through my bones. My headlamp flickered, revealing glimpses. Faces pressed against glass, hands reaching. The water around me rippling as if alive. When I burst through the tunnel into the upper chamber, I didn't stop. I shot upward, desperate for the surface. The air gauge hit red. My lungs screamed. At 100 feet, my vision tunneled. At 50, my ears popped. I ignored the pain. When I finally broke the surface, I ripped out my regulator and gasped, choking. The lake was still, silent. The moon hung overhead, pale and distant. My boat was gone. The shore was just a dark outline in the distance. I was alone. I floated there for a long time, trying to make sense of what had happened. The hum had stopped, but my body still vibrated from it. My chest felt bruised. When I finally started swimming toward shore, something brushed against my leg. I froze. I looked down. There was nothing. Just black water, then faintly a light appeared below me. One beam, then two, then dozens, headlamps moving upward, and behind them, silhouettes. Human shapes, walking, not swimming. Their movements slow and steady, as if the water didn't resist them at all. The suits, They were coming up. I kicked harder, but the lights kept rising. One reached within 10 feet of me. I could see the helmet now, the faceplate glowing from inside with faint pale light. And behind the glass, a face. Not bone. Not rotted mine. I don't remember getting to shore. I just remember crawling onto the rocks, coughing, shaking, staring back at the still water. The lights below were fading, sinking again. I sat there until sunrise. When the rangers found me, I couldn't speak. They asked about my team. I said nothing. They searched the lake for 2 weeks. Found nothing. No bodies, no gear. No suits, just my old knife and the one I'd dropped inside the cave. It was sitting on the shore, clean, polished, like someone had placed it there for me. That night, back in the hospital, I woke up to the sound of dripping, a steady tap. Tap, tap, from the corner of the room. I turned my head. A puddle of lake water spread across the floor, and in the reflection, faint and wavering, I saw 3 lights shining from under the bed. I don't remember blacking out. 1 second, I was staring into that impossible chamber, my lights reflecting off symbols carved into stone that no one had touched for centuries. And the next, I was waking up in pitch black, my mouth dry, my tongue tasting like rust. For a moment, I didn't even know which way was up. My hands reached out, brushing against the smooth rock wall beside me, damp and cold. The pressure in my ears told me I wasn't underwater anymore. My regulator was gone. My mask was cracked. My suit felt tight, stiff with silt and salt. When I managed to sit up, the beam from my backup flashlight caught something that made my chest seize, my diving partner's tank. It was lying 10 feet away, wedged against a stalagmite, the metal scratched up like it had been dragged. "Ethan?" I whispered. My voice echoed strangely, like it was bouncing through a dozen throats. Nothing. Just the slow drip of water. I grabbed the flashlight, my fingers trembling so bad I nearly dropped it. The beam danced across the chamber, over slick walls, half-flooded tunnels, and something else, piles of fabric. Diving suits, at least a dozen of them. They stood upright against the far wall, stiff and pale from mineral deposits, their helmets facing outward, each one tilted at a slightly different angle. Some were torn open, as if whatever had been inside them had forced its way out. Others looked untouched, except for one right in the middle that had a mask identical to Ethan's. For a second, I thought maybe he was in there. Maybe he was just frozen in shock. "Ethan," I said again, louder this time. The sound didn't come back as a single echo, it came back layered, like there were 6 or 7 versions of my voice, each one slightly delayed, slightly distorted. One of them didn't even sound like me. I turned my light toward the suits. That's when one of the helmets tilted just a fraction of an inch. Just enough for the beam to glint off the glass. I took a step back, my boot splashing into the thin layer of water. The sound broke through the silence, and suddenly there was movement. Not fast, not violent, but subtle, deliberate. The suits began to lean forward one by one, like something inside them was shifting its weight. I froze. My light flickered, the battery whining. When it came back, the suits had stopped moving, but they weren't where they'd been. They were closer. I ran. I didn't even think. I just turned toward the narrow opening at the side of the chamber and started crawling. My tank scraped the rock, sparks flickering where the metal hit stone. Every sound I made felt too loud, too sharp. Behind me, I could hear fabric dragging, something wet, something breathing. When I finally squeezed through the gap, my hand brushed across something slimy, a film that felt like algae but thicker, like half-melted plastic. My glove came away slick. The tunnel sloped upward, the ceiling so low I had to drag myself on elbows and knees. My flashlight beam jittered over the rock, wet, smooth, covered in patterns. Not carvings, veins. Veins of pale stone that looked like they'd been shaped around something once soft. At the end of the tunnel, I found a cavern filled with water again. The pool was still almost glassy, and in the center was something that looked like a diving bell. Rusted metal, half submerged, old as hell. I should have turned back. I should have waited. But my oxygen was almost gone, and I was shaking too hard to think. I slipped into the water. The temperature hit me like knives, colder than any lake water had a right to be. My limbs started to lock up, but I forced myself to keep going, swimming toward the bell. Something moved beneath me. Not a fish, not air. Something that displaced the entire pool, slowly like a body the size of a van. When I reached the bell, I grabbed the rim and pulled myself inside. The water dripped from my suit. My breath fogged the air, and then I realized there was light, faint, golden, coming from a crack in the floor of the bell. I leaned closer. The crack wasn't a light source. It was a reflection. Below the metal floor, beneath a layer of clear water, was a face. Pale, eyes open. Ethan. He was lying on his back, his mask shattered, his skin bloated. His lips were moving. For a second I thought it was bubbles, air trapped in his lungs, but then I heard it. Faint but unmistakable. Go back. My flashlight flickered, and in that strobing light I saw his expression change. The lips stopped moving. His eyes rolled upward until only the whites showed. The water below the floor started to vibrate, tiny ripples spreading outward. Then slowly, the reflection of his face began to twist, his mouth stretching too wide, his eyes sinking deeper. It was like watching something try to learn how to wear him. The voice came again, this time from right behind me. Go back. I turned, swinging the flashlight up. Something was standing in the opening of the diving bell. Not a person. Not really, it had a shape like one. Broad shoulders, arms, a head, but it was hollow. Just a diving suit, filled with water that sloshed when it moved. Its faceplate was cracked open and inside was nothing but dark. I scrambled back, slipping against the slick metal, my shoulders slamming into the wall. The suit took a step forward, the sound of its boots echoing in the water. I grabbed the ladder on the side of the bell and climbed. The air above was just a few feet away. I could see the faint shimmer of the surface, moonlight reflecting through. But when I broke through, it wasn't the same lake. I was in another chamber, one with no ceiling, no visible exit. The air was stale and heavy, the surface of the water like oil. I pulled myself up onto a ledge, coughing, shivering. My flashlight was dying now, the beam barely cutting through the dark. Then I noticed something carved into the stone beside me. Descent is ascent. The words looked freshly cut. I took a step back, and my boot landed on something soft. When I looked down, I saw a torn wetsuit still filled. The chest was rising and falling. Before I could react, it sat up, fast, jerky, and a gloved hand grabbed my wrist. The grip was icy cold, strong enough to bruise. I screamed and tore free, stumbling backward into the water. The light dropped from my hand, sinking into the dark. I could still see the glow fading, drifting deeper, until it illuminated something far below. Rows of them. Dozens of bodies floating in the depths, perfectly still. Their eyes open and staring upward, each one of them wearing a diver's suit. Each one of them me. I don't know how long I floated after that. Time didn't work right down there. Sometimes I heard voices above me, sometimes below. Once I swear I saw daylight, but it dissolved when I blinked. When I finally woke again, I was back in my boat. The sun was out. The lake was calm. My dive computer said I'd been gone 12 hours. Ethan's gear was gone. My camera was gone. All that was left was my cracked mask, and a voice in my head that wouldn't stop repeating what I'd seen carved into that stone. Descent is ascent. That night, when I checked my reflection in the cabin mirror, I noticed something floating just behind me, barely visible through the glass. A man in a diving suit, standing perfectly still. And every time I turned to look, the air filled with the sound of bubbles, coming from my own throat. The cold hit me like a wall. When I slipped beneath the water, the world above vanished. Sound, air, light, gone in an instant. Only the beam of my flashlight cut through the dark green murk, scattering off silt like falling ash. The rope around my waist trembled, tugging gently, James's signal from the boat. Still with you. I tugged twice in return. Still here, I wished I believed that, because the deeper I went, the less I felt like anyone was with me at all. At 15 feet, the lake floor came into view, an uneven bed of silt, stones, and waterlogged branches. The trees beneath had long since died, their trunks bleached bone white by years underwater. Something about the silence was wrong. It wasn't peaceful. It was pressurized, heavy, like the lake itself was holding its breath. My light swept across the bottom, searching for the old pier. The map said it should have been right here. the original dock from the summer camp before the flood. Instead, I found footprints, bare ones, half-faded impressions pressed deep into the mud, leading away from me, farther into the lake. And they were fresh. I should have gone back then. Any sane person would have, but I wasn't sane. Not after hearing the recording. That voice and the one we'd picked up the night before had said my name. My full name, and it had come from somewhere down here. I followed the prints, the beam shaking slightly as I swam. The lake bed sloped downward, darker with every foot. At about 30 feet, the rope went slack. James must have let it out farther. Then, through the murk, I saw it. A cabin, half sunken, tilted at an angle, one corner buried in mud. The roof was intact, shingles curling like old bark. A window stared back at me, glass cracked but still whole. Inside, something moved. I hovered just outside the window, breathing hard through the regulator. My light cut through the cabin interior. Waterlogged furniture, peeling wallpaper, a desk overturned, and floating in the center of the room. A photograph. It spun lazily in the current, catching my light. A family portrait half dissolved by time. A man, a woman, a little boy, all smiling, until I realized the faces were wrong, blurry, as if someone had dragged a wet brush across their eyes and mouths. The boy's face was gone completely, erased, replaced with a smear of white. Something tapped the glass once, twice, a faint thunk, like fingernails against the window from the inside. I turned the light back. Nothing there. Just my reflection in the cracked glass, except my reflection blinked. I screamed into the regulator and kicked back, heart slamming. My flashlight fell, spinning through the dark until it hit the mud below. That's when I saw the door. It wasn't supposed to be open. The cabin's front door, half buried in silt, stood ajar. Black water seeping through the gap. And from that gap came bubbles. Big ones, slow, rhythmic, like breathing. I told myself it was trapped air, that I was imagining the rest, but then a hand slid out, pale, wrinkled, fingernails long and dark. It reached through the doorway, feeling the water like someone testing the air before stepping outside. I froze, body trembling so hard I almost dropped my backup light. The hand stopped moving. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, it grabbed the edge of the doorframe and started pulling itself out. That's when I turned and swam. The rope jerked tight around my waist as I ascended. I could see the faint glow of the surface above, my small distance safe. Then the rope went slack, something had cut it. A shadow passed over me, quick, silent. When I spun, my light caught the cabin door again. It was wide open now, and something was standing in the doorway, motionless, watching me leave, their head tilted slightly, hair drifting upward like black weeds. I kicked harder, lungs burning. Halfway up, my regulator sputtered, a dry, rattling gasp. My tank was still half full. It wasn't out of air, but the water around me had turned thick, almost oily, dragging against my limbs. I clawed toward the surface. But the more I fought, the slower I moved, and then I felt it. A hand grabbing my ankle. Not firm, gentle. Almost pleading. I looked down. The pale face stared up at me, eyes clouded, mouth moving soundlessly. Through the distortion, I could almost read the lips. "Don't leave me." I tore free and kicked upward, breaking the surface with a ragged gasp that felt like it ripped my lungs apart. The boat was gone. The rope, too. Just the still lake stretching out in every direction, silent as glass. I don't remember how long I floated there, screaming James's name, spinning in circles. When I finally saw a light on the far shore, I swam for it. It took everything I had left. By the time I stumbled onto the rocks, the sky was already paling. There was no sign of the boat, no sign of James. Just tire marks in the mud and a single wet footprint leading into the trees. Later, when the sheriff's department dredged the lake, they said there was nothing down there. No cabin, no footprints, no body. They found my dive rope, cleanly sliced, and the photograph I'd seen underwater. Only this time, the faces were clear. The man, the woman, the boy, and behind them, two more figures standing in the lake. One of them looked like me, the other looked like James. They drained Lake Mara 6 months later. Officially, it was for maintenance, an old dam needing inspection, erosion concerns, budget allocation. Unofficially, they wanted to know if the stories were true. By then, everyone in town had heard what happened. The missing diver. The man who swore he saw a house beneath the water. The photo. They called it the drowned cabin, and no one believed me. Not even me sometimes until last week. A letter arrived. No return address. Just my name, written in slanted handwriting that looked familiar but wrong, like someone copying it from memory. Inside was a photo, not the same one the police found. This one was new. It showed the lake empty and cracked, drained to its muddy bones, and in the center a dark square shape, half buried in the earth. A roof. On the back, just 3 words. Come finish it. I burned the letter, but the image stayed in my head. The hand, the face, the voice whispering, "Don't leave me." So last night, I drove back. The air was colder now, October sharp, with that smell of dying leaves and distant rain. The road down to the lake was blocked by fencing and no trespassing signs, but the padlock on the gate was already broken. Someone had been here before me. I parked near the shore, killed the headlights, and sat there listening. Silence. Not the normal kind, not the kind you get at night in the woods. This silence had weight. I could hear my pulse. I could feel it echoing back from the empty basin below. When I climbed down the bank, my boots sank into the mud. The lake bed stretched out in front of me, black, cracked veins of water still glimmering between the ridges. And there it was, the cabin. Not imagination. Not a dream. It was real. Tilted, splintered, half buried in the dried silt. The door hung open like a mouth. Inside, everything was wrong. The furniture I'd seen floating underwater now sat upright, covered in mud and lakeweed. The walls were streaked with black rot, and across the floor, footprints, small ones, bare, leading deeper inside. Something caught my eye near the corner. A flashlight. My flashlight. The one I'd dropped months ago, still crusted with silt, still cracked down the side. When I touched it, it flickered on. Just once. Just long enough to show me the writing on the far wall. Scrawled in mud and algae, finger marks smeared across the planks. "You came back." The sound came next. A dragging, wet shuffle from the back room. Slow, uneven. I called out, "James?" Knowing it wasn't him. The sound stopped. For a long moment, all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. Then something whispered. Not loud, just close. I waited. My breath caught. I turned slowly, light shaking. A shadow moved in the corner, something pale against the dark. I stepped forward once, and then the floorboards beneath me gave way. I hit the ground hard, falling through into the flooded crawl space beneath the cabin. The water was freezing up to my chest, and something soft brushed against my leg. When I lifted the light, I froze. Dozens of faces stared back at me. Not people. Masks. Old, rotted, waterlogged faces made of paper and wood, floating in the black water. Some smiled. Some didn't have mouths at all. They swayed gently, bumping against one another like they were breathing. And then, behind them, movement. A figure slowly rose from the water. Head first, shoulders next, hair drifting like black moss. It was the woman from the photo, skin gray and split. Eyes white, mouth open in a perfect silent scream. But when she spoke, it wasn't screaming, it was my voice. "You left him, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe." The faces in the water turned toward me, all of them, as if hearing her words. Then she lunged. Her hand grabbed my wrist, ice cold and hard as stone. The water erupted around us and faces breaking apart. Masks spinning, I pulled, kicked, tore free, and for one instant, as the flashlight slipped from my hand again, I saw another figure behind her. James, standing in the dark, eyes black, mouth barely moving. "Stay with us," I screamed, clawed up the hole and crawled through the rotting floor, gasping into the open air. The cabin was shaking, timbers groaning, mud splitting beneath it. I ran. By the time I reached the bank, the sky was turning gray, dawn creeping over the hills. I turned back once. The cabin was gone. No collapse, no explosion, no sound. Just gone, and in its place, water. The lake, full again, as if it had never been drained. They say lakes remember. Every object that sinks into them, every sound, every secret, nothing truly leaves. I used to think that was poetic. Now I know it's literal. Because when I close my eyes, I still feel the pull of that place. The cold on my skin, the weight on my ankle, and sometimes, and when the house is quiet, when the wind outside sounds just like water moving, I hear tapping. Soft, steady, like fingernails on glass.